So it's the Security Weekly News, and I'm really glad my mic wasn't hot before the show, but it's episode 318. I'm Doug White, and it is the week of 13 August 2023. We've got some DEFCON stuff, ScrutisWeb, DoubleDrive, GitHub, npms, AI cheating advice, more news, and Jason Wood on the Security Weekly News.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week, your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News.
Are you constantly thinking about how to keep your enterprise as secure as possible? Get to know Chrome Enterprise, the trusted browser for security-conscious professionals like you. Its ease of use for IT and security teams and added access controls protect the remote, extended, and hybrid workforce, keeping your entire enterprise safe. Don't settle for a browser that compromises your organization. Visit securityweekly.com/Chrome Enterprise now to learn more and start protecting your enterprise like never before. Why does multi-factor authentication have to be a pain for users? It doesn't. Beyond Identity is the most secure MFA on the market and the easiest to use. They ensure that every authentication is multi-factor by default, with phishing-resistant factors that secure access from the start. Beyond Identity safeguards organizations from breaches, data loss, and fraud by eliminating weak phishable authentication factors like OTP and SMS push codes. Go to securityweekly.com/Beyond Identity to get a free demo. That's securityweekly.com/Beyond Identity to get a free demo today. And all right, welcome to the Security Weekly News. Well, if you did get to go to B-Sides, Black Hat, and DEF CON last week, I'm jealous, and I hope you had fun and have sobered up by now. But if not, if you didn't get to go, well, I heard it was a good time. I had a lot of friends that were there, and maybe I'll be there next year. Who knows? I just need a sponsor. Come on, hint, hint. But all right, Senac Red Team found some problems with ScrutisWeb. That's an interesting name, ScrutisWeb, which is I'd never heard of that product before, but it's an ATM fleet monitoring software tool, which allows organizations to basically monitor their banking or retail ATM fleets. Wait for it, from a web browser. What could go wrong? But it doesn't apparently, the vulnerabilities didn't apparently result in ATM spewing money out or anything like that. But the tool itself is used to monitor hardware. It can reboot ATMs. It can shut down ATMs, send and receive files to them, and modify data on the ATM remotely. So it actually sounds like a pretty reasonable piece of software that you would probably need. I did work for a bank that was putting in ATMs, so it tells you how long ago it was, but they were putting in ATMs, and one of their big concerns was how they would monitor these things and see what was going on with them and so forth. Well, they found 4 different types of vulnerabilities in this software that they were patched in July of this year. But the 4 vulnerabilities included a path traversal issue, an authorization bypass, hard-coded crypto keys, and arbitrary file upload issues that could all be exploited by remote unauthenticated attackers. So the worst kind, if you want the technical definition. But CISA had published an advisory about this as well and said that it was a problem. So while it didn't seem, that I mean, I read the article twice actually, because I was trying to make sure that it wasn't going to be one of those really hyperbolic kind of things where they're talking about the ATM spewing out cash in the lobby of Caesar's Palace. But rather, it did seem to be an outward pivot point that attackers could use as a first place to get into the network. And, obviously these things are back-end connected back into banks and whatnot, so they could get all kinds of information out of the system, as well. In a Black Hat presentation last week, an automated tool called DoubleDrive was exhibited by a Safe Breach researcher, which basically demonstrated that OneDrive, which is Microsoft's ubiquitous file syncing tool, could actually be used as a kind of ransomware encryption tool to encrypt all the other files on the machine. Now, this was due to the fact that I guess the primary vector here was OneDrive is trusted by Windows, so that's of course a problem. And the endpoint detection and response programs also trust OneDrive. So the point of this presentation, I guess, was that they could put things on the cloud side of this that could then be trusted and pulled down onto the local machines. And there's a whole bunch more to it. It was a pretty elaborate presentation. Microsoft has apparently patched this so it no longer works at this point, but patched it literally like this month. The tool, the DoubleDrive tool, is available on GitHub. So as you can guess, it's going to turn into a real threat pretty soon. Apparently, since OneDrive has been being installed on Windows since about 2013, it's on most every machine out there. And I would say this is a bigger threat vector on older machines and stuff that's got OneDrive installed on it, a long time ago. Microsoft has often, through their marketing materials, implied or directly stated that OneDrive is a ransomware failsafe, so it's a way to avoid ransomware. I don't think I agree with that. Even long before I saw about this vulnerability, because I've never really trusted OneDrive. I love OneDrive, the idea of it, and the fact that I had a laptop get destroyed in an accident, and I was able to get back up and running within just a very brief period of time by using things like OneDrive. But I still don't trust it, and I still back up all those files on a regular basis to offline backups that can't be reached in a ransomware attack. But basically, this attack started with getting into the user's OneDrive account. Okay, well, we can all probably do that. And then apparently, if you can do that, the OneDrive access token is in the log. But you can't read that log file directly, but you download another tool off GitHub that collects the access tokens from the log file. Okay, so since a process running within the user's permissions can access OneDrive by default, the researcher was able to exfiltrate the access token by uploading it to the OneDrive cloud and then sharing the file from the OneDrive cloud by email to himself. So since OneDrive would allow you to create symbolic links locally, which Microsoft calls junctions, but basically those junctions can be created inside a OneDrive folder and those link to files elsewhere. Then you can encrypt everything. So now OneDrive has a lot of anti-ransomware stuff already in place, which maintains all kinds of file versions, and I think it's set up to 500 copies of a file. Of course, all this is dependent on disk space, I'm sure. But this attack took care of that by moving all the encrypted files into the recycle bin, then emptying the bin, and then recreating the files on OneDrive, which apparently, made it recovery impossible. There's also then shadow copies on the disk, which Microsoft uses to allow you to recover files as well. But again, they had a way around that, which was to use SharePoint to get control over the drive and delete the shadow copies on the command line, which required admin privileges, which starts to sound like it's doable. I mean, obviously they demonstrated it being done, but that it was not certainly the easiest thing to do. That doesn't mean people won't do it. But all the detailed slides and things are on that, on links to that article. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, otherwise patch up and avoid these kind of problems. In a B-Sides presentation last week, two different presentations from GitGuardian were looking at public GitHub commits over 2022, which represented about 1 billion commits. That's a few commits. But they were looking to see how often access credentials, security keys, and any other secret, and they defined that pretty broadly, but any kind of secret that could be obtained was embedded in app commits. And in the examination, they found at least 10 million, with an M, secrets in the public commits. So they said this represented about 67% more than they found in 2021. Now, it did not say if they controlled for growth in the overall number of commits or how many commits were in 2021 and so forth. Maybe you could suss that out somehow or dig it out of the report. I didn't go that far. But it did show a huge growth in the number of commits that contain secrets. They said that 1 out of 10 GitHub authors exposed a secret in 2022, and that 5.5 out of every 1,000 commits contained some sort of secret. The most commonly leaked specific secret they found in 2022 was a Google API key that comprised about 9.7% of the total commits containing that. GitGuardian said they had decompiled 50,000 Android apps on Google Play and found that nearly half of those apps had some sort of exposed plain text credentials inside of the commit. So it's a pretty interesting presentation to me. I mean, I think all of us have coded some kind of credential into some kind of code at some point or other. I mean, I remember, and Pepperidge Farm remembers, but at the end of the day, we need to start working on this because people are using these and targeting these things, and it's really tough for the end users who are using these kind of tools to know what's there and what's not there. CRA Business Intelligence Unit did a study about threat intel and indicated that most people, and I wasn't real thrilled about the headline here, they indicated that most people use reactive measures over proactive measures. That's what the headline basically says. I mean, that's always been true, right? I mean, it's easier to react than whatever the hell opposite of react is. I don't know, proact. I proacted this morning. Don't make me proact all over this room. Don't do it. But, I mean, it's always been the case, right? It's easier to sell management on fire insurance when the CEO's Maserati's on fire in the parking lot than when you're just speculating about the Maserati might burn. I mean, then they're like, yeah, we'll deal with that next year. So the reactive side of it, I get. We should, of course, be proactive, but that's not always easy to sell. The study was a survey of 196 security professionals. 70% of the respondents said that vulnerability prioritization is the top use case for threat intel. Okay, makes sense. 65% said that they use threat intel to aid them with reactive incident response. Okay. I'm surprised 100% of them didn't say that, but you know, but then they turned around and said, but proactive measures were lower, but 50% of the respondents said that they use threat intel for threat hunting, which I would again have thought that would be higher. But that doesn't necessarily mean that nobody's doing proactive stuff. It just means that they used it for reactive more. So I was a little unhappy with that headline. 46% of them said they used threat intel for advanced warning of future attacks. So again, they didn't really explain how they broke these pieces out, and probably the whole report might have more details about exactly what was done. But it's very interesting to me. But 50% of the people were using it proactively, and 46% of them were using it to predict future behavior. It was just that there was a larger number saying that they use it for reactive studies. So it wasn't really all or nothing. It was just, you know, sort of how much of each. But I think proactive is great, but it is a lot harder to do, and there's plenty to react to in my humble experience. But although we should be more proactive, it's just always going to be a harder sell. The full report of this, it has all the grim details, will be released on the 21st of August, so that's next week. The BlackBerry Global Threat Intelligence Report revealed that there's been a 40% increase in attacks against government and public service organizations over sort of Q2. It was March through May. They did a 90-day block that I couldn't determine if they were using Q2 or not, but I think maybe they meant like March, meaning the end of March through the end of, so March, April, and May. It did. I think they sort of put it across a different block. It wasn't really Q2, but this included public transit, utility, schools, and other government services. The report covered March to May of 2023, so that's sort of an interesting 90-day block. But BlackBerry said they observed and stopped 1.5 million attacks during that time period, which was about 11.5 attacks per minute and 1.7 novel malware samples per minute. Scary. Sounds like the subway in about 1980 to me. But they found that the most targeted industries were healthcare and financial services, that financial institutions suffered increased risk due to remote access as a result of mobile threats like data exfiltration, financial app spoofing, overlays, SMS text intercepts, and so forth, which none of that surprises me. But they found that Lazarus Group, a North Korean-based group with links to Russia, was extremely active during this time period. Their report also contains their list of the top 20 techniques being used by attackers across a lot of different venues, with Emotet, Redline, Agent Tesla, Black Cat, and so forth, all being at the tops of their various categories. So it's an interesting report if you're interested in such things. Another round of pushing NPM packages that contain malware appears to be going on that seems to be linked to North Korea. Phylum said that the latest round of attacks were very similar to a previous attack based on NPMs being pushed out back in June. Many of these latest packages were uploaded between the 9th of August and the 12th of August this year, and they did include a list of NPMs in this article that offer a bunch of features that look useful for app development, like video codecs and things like that. So we've seen this before. You know, you're building an app, you need a video codec, you go on GitHub and try to download it, or you go on PyPy, or you go on, you know, any repository and you try to find something that will do that for you. Phylum said, quote, due to the sophisticated nature of the attack and a small number of affected packages, we suspect this is another highly targeted attack, which likely has a social engineering aspect involved in order to get targets to actually install these packages. And again, it sounds like a supply chain attack to me. So they're trying to embed various pieces of malware in various specialized applications, which can then be used to compromise that industry later. A seemingly legit model in this case is loaded with a post-install hook, which executes an index.js, a JavaScript file. That launches a daemon process, which then executes a file named app.js. The app.js file opens that daemon port, sets up comms with a command and control server at this domain, ql.reskdesk.net, which looks like a legit Rush desk remote connection, but it's actually a spoofed domain apparently, and that sends all the basic info about that server up to the infected host or up to the command and control. The malware then just sits there pinging and waits for further instructions. So every 45 seconds, it pings command and control and says, hey, I'm still here, and waits to see if they've decided to exploit it. It doesn't seem clear who exactly is being targeted with this, but if you have a nice little backdoor installed and you can download instructions to the machine remotely, well, the official industry term for this is bad. So yeah. Now, while I don't agree with everything I read in this article, I did want to clip it for you about AI cheating accusations. I mean, a lot of you take classes, a lot of you have taken classes, or maybe even teaching classes. I mean, the article has some pretty good advice along with some fairly hyperbolic statements like, quote, when your work gets flagged, your instructor might expect you to prove that you didn't use AI to cheat. That isn't fair. How can you prove a negative? I'm like, that's not what instructors are asking you. They're asking you to prove that you did the work, not to prove you didn't use AI. That would be completely stupid, and most people teaching classes are probably smarter than that. So I didn't really like what they said there. But they do have really, really good advice. But I'm not going to ask you to prove you didn't use AI. I'm going to ask you to explain your work to me. And of course, this article then suggests that you hand a copy of this article to your instructor. Right, that's going to help. Hey, buddy, read this. Like, right, yeah, sure. Okay, but you still cheated. Why don't you explain your code to me, and let's just skip reading stupid articles. But they do have some good suggestions in there, like documenting your work process, like with drafts and such, using version histories in Word or Google Doc to illustrate your development. And I always try to get people to do this. I mean, I've been seeing people cheat as long as I've been in school or working at a school. I've seen people cheating. I've seen papers where people literally cut and paste whole things from websites that still had links in it, like click here to go to Microsoft's guide, or see page 564 for additional references, and that kind of stuff where they didn't even bother to read what they were copying and pasting. But there's a lot of false positives in things like Turnitin, and I think that was really the gist of the article, was that tools like AI detection tools are not very good. And even Turnitin says that they have tons of false positives. So, I mean, I really doubt any responsible professor is just straight up accusing people of cheating without pretty good evidence in these days. But still, I try to get students to stop and save a backup point in their programming problems and their networking problems so they can go back to that. So if somebody accuses you of that, pull all those versions out and show that to the instructor and say, let me show you here what I was doing, and then I realized it was wrong, and I went over here and I did this. Maybe that'll convince them. But regardless, it is a kind of an interesting article that I felt like you could send to somebody, or maybe read, or if you're teaching class or taking class, it might be useful to you. Well, famous for his "I just don't like ducks" meme, he parlayed the catchphrase, no, I just don't like ducks, into a multi-million-dollar business empire with a comic book called No Ducks, his clothing line, Duck Off, and of course the movie Duck It All with Lil Nas X and Justin Bieber playing twin ducks who just happen to belong to Jennifer Coolidge. Please welcome Jason Wood.
Hey, everybody. So back on June 27th, actually just this year, I covered a BBC article that the title was, "Why is it so rare to hear about Western cyber attacks?" Apparently, the Chinese government reads the BBC as well. Or maybe they're listening to the show, which maybe that's a little unlikely. But either way, they decided that, why aren't they hearing more about this? So they're going to start publishing some information here. At least that's the idea behind this. Yesterday, the Register actually published the article that I found that had the title, "Chinese Media Teases Imminent Expose of Seismic U.S. Spying Scheme," which sounds pretty wild. Seismic what? Like seismic like really bad, or seismic like, oh wait, no, it was seismic monitoring systems. Actually, it was what is being spied on. But they cited an article by the China's Global Times, which covered an implant that was discovered at the Wuhan Earthquake Monitoring Center, which now all the world knows about Wuhan and where that is, of course. Whereas a few years ago I wouldn't have. Now the Global Times is a state-controlled media outlet, so it's kind of safe to say that assume the article about the implant was authorized by all the powers that be and stuff like that, and definitely is going to have put forward their point of view on this. But it was still kind of interesting to read through what they're describing. They talk about this implant, again, being installed on seismic monitoring computers that are deployed throughout the Hubei, I guess, how do you pronounce it, province of the People's Republic of China. The Global Times stated that the implant was, and this is a quote, very complex backdoor malware in the victim's network, fitting the characteristics of U.S. intelligence agencies, highly concealed, and aiming at stealing earthquake monitoring related data with a clear military reconnaissance purpose, end quote. Now, first, I paused a little bit. I'm like, wait a minute. Why are we attacking seismic systems? What's going on here? And then I realized, oh, wait a minute. Now, this would absolutely be interesting because if somebody tests a weapon somewhere and it explodes, these seismic systems are really sensitive. They'll pick it up, and we can start figuring out some stuff about what they're doing, and because of that. And Western governments and militaries would absolutely be interested in this sort of thing. They try and figure out, hey, how powerful is this weapon system, or what are some capabilities? Where are they testing it at? Things like that. So, all right, yeah, no surprise. That would be potentially really useful to come under attack. Though now it got me wondering about similar seismic systems deployed here in the United States by universities to monitor for earthquakes. Thinking like, nearby you've got the University of Utah that has a bunch of these seismic systems monitoring stations deployed throughout the western United States. So how well protected are those? Which I'm guessing is probably not fantastic. Anyhow, kind of interesting thought. Anyway, get back on track. The Register quotes a member of the National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, or as I call it, CCPPCC, which, I'm not sure which is easier to say. Anyway, that the data would be useful for, and this is a quote, judging geological terrain, analyzing weapons systems, and nuclear tests, end quote. So I was like, oh yeah, there you go. Confirmation of what I was thinking. Anytime you start firing off nukes and doing test runs of those, people are interested to see how well that works. It was kind of, like I said, they don't have much technical data in this. I actually did go glance at the Global Times article as well to see what they said. You didn't have any more information about the what they had discovered at this point. Maybe they'll report on this a little more. I'm not sure. The Register did report on some statements made by Chinese officials that the U.S. is a hacker empire. And that China only, this part actually made me laugh a little bit. China only reports on facts and are objective and professional. And I was like, all right, yeah. I just recalled the joke about, how can you tell if a politician is lying? Their lips are moving. Note that there's no geographic limitations on that. So the Global Times definitely had no problem with getting eloquent about what they thought of this. They raised the specter of causing public panics because the attackers might interfere with measuring an earthquake that's in process, apparently, to inhibit the disaster response, or on the flip side, report an earthquake through the system that isn't real. Now, either way, I was like, well, I mean, the seismic systems aren't going to do much during an earthquake because that's after the fact. As anybody who's lived through an earthquake can tell you, you're very aware that it's happening. And if it gets reported through the systems and the Earth's not shaking and it's reporting a 7-point something or other, that's also pretty obvious. But still, they're saying this would cause panic and disorder and result in casualties among innocent people. I just looked at it and thought, well, all right, so fear, uncertainty, and doubt is pretty much a useful tool all over the world, apparently. As I harp on them for giving their opinions and getting eloquent about it, of course, I'm giving mine too, because commentary is like that. Will the PRC release more information about the attack? Honestly, who knows? It might be interesting to read if they do. I'd be a little wary about taking everything at face value, but still, I would be like, hey, check this out. This would be kind of interesting look at things. When you get into sort of stuff, it's zero surprise that the United States or any other Western intelligence agency would target systems employed by another country that would allow them to monitor weapons tests. no shock there. Spying game's been going on for hundreds of years. It's just moved into a new realm. Now they can just gather information, though, without putting people on the ground out there and risking losing people or as much to being picked up by the opposing side and having them get sent to prison and pumped for more information and all that other stuff. The U.S. is attacking China's systems and trying to gather information. Well, that's not a surprise. So is China and Russia and the UK and France and pretty much any other country out there. For the most part, I just thought of a tweet by Robert M. Lee over at Dragos where he basically said, "Hey, man, every country's got their own team and they've got people there. They're playing for their own team. Spying's part of that deal." Certainly, the cybersecurity marketing companies have made a heck of a lot of marketing splash out of this. It being able to call out a name and say, "Hey, here's the person who done it." That satisfies a deep urge in all of us to know who's responsible for something that we don't like. Now it looks like we're, China's wanting to play in this game a little bit too. Now the criminal groups, I made the comment about, everybody playing for their own team and stuff like that. Now the criminal groups, those folks totally in it for themselves. Much less sympathy for them. They don't care who gets hurt in the process. I've known a few 80-plus-year-olds who've been scammed out of money due to these clowns. So I have nothing but harsh feelings for them. The article's interesting. I'm interested. I want to see what, are they going to start publishing more? They want to. I'm quite curious. With that, let's go back over to Doug and see if we can get him to talk about the time that he drew lobster pornography in the air over the Rhode Island Seafood Festival using only a Cessna 120 and several boxes of Swisher Sweets.
Oh, that sounds fun. Now I've got another bucket list item, right? Is like that actually sounds pretty fun. Yeah. Might take a while on a Cessna 150, but
it might. Those things, for those that don't know, one of those things, if a sparrow crosses in front of you, you catch turbulence.
Yeah, and you can just kind of wait for it to go by because it's like, pop, 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 pop. I mean, 150
single piston.
Yeah, the 150 is pretty
tiny.
slow. I've flown quite a few 150s, and not as slow as a Piper Cub now, mind you. That one's, I didn't fly that, but I rode in one time, and it was like, wow, this thing's like basically a kite with a rubber band engine on it, but it'll go anywhere, and it's indestructible, so that's why people love them. I mean, but yeah, that sounds fun. Thank you, Jason.
I'm happy to help. The people in Rhode Island aren't, but I'm happy to help.
Hey, I mean, it's like it'll be a thing. All right, and finally, apparently there was a bomb threat at Caesars Forum last week, and if you are under a rock or whatever, that's where DEFCON was being held, of course. They had to clear the whole place out on Saturday evening before the main party night happened, so that was probably the busiest single time at DEFCON. DEFCON's always a little bit crazy in there, and every time I've been there, it was pretty nuts. But the Saturday night with the big parties, and they had a whole pile of sessions going on. But basically, a phone call tip came in that a suspicious package was located in a building. Obviously, firefighters and law enforcement have to take that seriously. If you're one of these ridiculous pranksters who basically ruined everyone's evening, I hope you felt somewhat satisfied. I don't know. It seems pretty lame to me. But the article speculated that this might have been, it seemed like a pretty big speculation, but they did say an interesting thing was that there was a badge shortage apparently at DEFCON. And of course, the DEFCON badges are something everybody wants and they collect and all this stuff. I don't know if this was the year, because I didn't go last year. I don't know if this was the year when they have the live badges that have like a circuit board and everything. The article acted like they had circuit board badges every year, but we all know that that's every other year. But apparently when people stood in LineCon and paid their $440 admission fee, instead of getting an official DEFCON badge, they got like paper badges. I don't know what they look like. Hopefully they didn't say something like, "Hi, my name is," but they apparently got a paper badge instead of a real badge. So I'm going to have to look into that a little further and talk to some people that were there. But and like I said, I don't know if there was. It would really be a ripoff if you didn't get the live badge, with the circuit board and stuff on. I would be really frustrated too. Not enough to call in bomb threats and commit crimes, but I would be pretty upset. But I don't know. DT, feel free to let me know. But I can't keep up with all this stuff that's going on at DEF CON. But also, according to DEF CON, there was a production and shipping problem problem on the badges. And, so it's DEF CON. There's always something like that going on. The DEF CON content, though, should be being posted pretty soon, and there's a link in that article if you're interested. This was sort of a wrap-up article, but maybe one day I'll get sent to DEF CON again, and I'll keep whining about it until I do. I will be at the Millennium Alliance in Austin, Texas next week. If you're there, please stop by and say hi. I'd love to see you. But that's the news. Thanks to Jason Wood, and I will see you Friday.